Hi everyone. Today we are going to be discussing your identity, who you are, what you will share with your students, and what you want to know about your students. And this very short presentation is going to set us up for the activities that we are going to accomplish next week in class. So before we begin, we need to know what ethnocultural identity is. Culture and ethnic identity differs from race, nationality, and socioeconomic identity. Ethnocultural identity is passed down from generation to generation. The way I like to think about ethnocultural identity is considering what are your family traditions? What are the things that your close family and family friends do with each other? How do you celebrate different holidays like Christmas or Hanukkah or Eid? Those are going to be tied much more closely to your ethnocultural identity than maybe your race, your nationality, or your socioeconomic identity. Sometimes our ethnocultural identity is mistaken for our nationality or socioeconomic cultural identity, um, depending on where you live. So, things that can tell you about your ethnocultural identity, like I said, how you celebrate a holiday. When I came to Nicholls State, I asked folks what they ate on Christmas Day dinner, if you celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah. And the responses blew me away. I heard a lot about dishes that involved rice and seafood, and I had never heard of oyster dressing before. I know that sounds crazy, right? Because it's such a common thing to eat. But where I'm from, Christmas dinner was turkey, stovetop dressing, green bean casserole, those types of foods. And so that's a way for you to identify your ethnocultural identity. Other ways is, why do you celebrate the 4th of July? Why is that such a special holiday to you and your family? Do you have people in your family who served in the military or feel very strongly about the independence of this nation? Or is it a situation where your family is very recent to the United States and it's just a great time to celebrate together over the summer? Something that would not necessarily be your ethnocultural identity, but more of your socioeconomic identity would be something like, where do you wash your clothes? And I find this statement to be very interesting because through my childhood and lifetime, I can distinctly remember when I had a washer and dryer in my home versus having to walk out to an apartment building's washer and dryer or going to a laundromat to have my clothes washed. So that's not going to be part of your ethnocultural identity. That's going to be more about your socioeconomic identity. And for some of us, we might even remember or still do line dry our clothes. So, in your textbook, if you've read chapter 1, they discuss the rings of culture. And your book really emphasizes that educators need to be responsive to the ethnocultural identity of students. But my question to you is this inclusive of a student's whole cultural identity? So, your ethnocultural identity includes things like your age, your sexual orientation, your nationality, what you consider to be your ethnicity, your gender, your religion, and where you are socioeconomically. Now, when we learned about the census and we did our discussion board on looking at census data of students at the various high schools and middle schools we think we might teach at or had attended, we get a really good snapshot of a lot of what your book considers the ethnocultural makeup of those, right? You could find out how many males and females attended classes. You can see the average age of students. You can look at the ethnicity and the race of those students and also the socioeconomics. Religion might not be part of that data. But does that really tell you who your students are? So what we're going to do in class on Wednesday is we ourselves are going to fill out our rings of culture. And you will see in our Moodle module that there will be a Google document for that. Every single person is going to have their own rings of culture. But there's so much more to us than just how old you are, what if you're male or female, how you identify yourself, your ethnicity and your religion. Those are all really important aspects of who we are. But does that really tell you who you are? And also, race is not a culture. There might be certain cultural aspects to your race, but race is just the color of your skin. And the week after this one, I'm actually going to teach you all the biology behind race. So we will be discussing what race is next week. So instead, maybe we really should be thinking about what is our cultural identity and what is our students' cultural identity that we would like to know in our classroom. Because for you to be an effective teacher, no matter if you are teaching math, science, English, or history, you need to make that information relevant to your students. So you need to know what they're interested in. If you're teaching math and you know your students' favorite sports and what's important to them, then you can start writing word problems that actually are relevant to them. Or if you're English and history, you can select readings and historical figures that your students might actually relate to. So you might want to ask them some questions like, what are your students interested in? What details they want to know that they want you to know? What are some patterns you've noticed in your life? That's a fascinating question to ask a middle schooler or a high schooler. Maybe they move around a lot. Maybe they notice a pattern in their relationships with others. Maybe they notice that they get really nervous at the beginning of the school year and flourish towards the end. And also what's terrific is things like ideas that your students wonder about or want to learn about that have to do with your subject, because then you can really capitalize on their area of interest. So how do you do this in your classroom? Well, we'll talk a little bit more about this on Wednesday, but you can easily incorporate a lot of very easy getting to know you assignments early on in the semester and even mid-semester check-ins. But is this all we should go on? What aspects do you want your teacher to know about you? So for example, as a college student or a high school student, what did you want us to know? And what do you not want us to know? For example, I always joke, I see all of my college students as angels. I don't want to know what you do on the weekends and the evenings. And if we see each other out at a Mardi Gras parade and you have a red cup in your hands, we are just going to wave from afar. But what type of impression do you want to leave with me? And what do you want your students to know about you? You know, you want to protect yourself, but also open yourself up enough that your students feel comfortable being around you. So we are going to, on Wednesday as well, discuss 5 aspects of you. So what makes you whole? What makes you you? And I'll go over more of this assignment, but we're going to then compare those aspects. So what are these aspects or rings on the iceberg? And I think something you need to understand is how you present yourself in the classroom and how your students present themselves in the classroom is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the surface culture that we get to see, right? You can see the types of food your students like, the dress, the music they listen to, the different languages and celebrations and games that they can bring into the classroom. But what you're not going to see is things like the notions of modesty, the concept of beauty, courtship practices, relationships to animals, attitude towards elders, concept of cleanliness, the notion of adolescence, or even things like their attitudes towards tolerance of physical pain or concept of self. I mean, those things, those take a long time to get to, especially if you're not teaching courses like physical education or health. I think too, understanding your students' facial expressions, I'll be honest, I'm a smiley human being. And when I started teaching at Nicholls State, I noticed a lot of in my classrooms. And I was like, oh my gosh, my students don't like me. They hate me. But no, that was just how my students express themselves in their class. Body language is a huge one, and touching. When I see you all on Wednesday, I'm going to share with you my embarrassing cultural incompetency moment that I had when I worked in California. So, when I see you all on Wednesday, we are going to focus on a couple of things. We are going to look at the difference between our rings of culture and the 5 aspects that make up ourselves, and we're going to work on that together. So, we're going to look at how much of these rings versus your pie chart are the same, how many are different, what would you want your instructor to know about you, and where on the iceberg are these items that you are willing to share with your students or with your instructor. And also, what's really important for you to know about your students and how you're going to get at knowing that so that you can create an inclusive classroom. Take care, have a great week, and I cannot wait to see you next Wednesday when we get working on these assignments.